All right. We're good to go. Ready, Chase?
Yep.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Smart with Your Money Live. Chase, we're going to talk about debt today.
We are.
Yeah.
Debt's always a fun conversation to have.
Yeah, for some people, not for anyone who has debt.
Or
And
not.
honestly, it's one of the most avoided conversations when it comes to personal finances. So, thank you for joining us, everyone. Hopefully this presentation does not cause you stress, but it is important to kind of recognize when that stress is being caused by finances, by debt, and what are some of the warning signs so that maybe you can address that, not just the debt, but the stress that goes along with it.
For sure. I mean, money is the number one reason for stress. I mean, life is stressful enough. We've all been through our own stress the last couple of years worldwide. And now, we've got Eastern Europe going through what they're going through, and gas prices through the roof, and our budget's getting tighter and tighter and tighter with inflation. And it's getting harder and harder to not go into debt when it's pretty easy to go into debt during normal circumstances. So this is something where you really want to realize that the stress is not just the stress, and it's coming from somewhere. So how to alleviate that?
Absolutely. So we'll get started. In fact, if you didn't know, debt does cause stress. According to the American Psychological Association's Stress in America study, 60% of Americans reported that money was a cause of stress. So that's more than half of America feels that money is a stressor. So, it's there, it's real, and it's important to realize when that money is, or those money financial struggles or financial situations are becoming too much to deal with. And it's different for everyone. There's no like magic amount of money where you start stressing about your finances. Right. Everyone has a different financial situation, so it's a different dollar amount, and everyone has a different threshold as far as how much or at what point they get stressed about it. You might talk to someone who carried a balance for 1 month and now they're stressing financially, where someone else might have no issue with that. So everyone's, situation is going to be different.
And it can be fleeting. It can be, for just certain periods of time. So it's just a matter of understanding what you're comfortable with and what you can do to alleviate it and not get to those stress points.
Right. So some of the signs are, if you worry when you pay, if you worry at the time you're checking out at the grocery store, if you worry about, when the waiter or waitress takes away your card to pay your bill, or you're sitting at the gas pump, if you're starting to worry whether or not your transaction will go through, that's a good sign that debt has become a problem and a source of stress.
Big time stress.
Yeah. And sometimes your cards just get declined. I had fraud one time in a card. It got declined. It's such a, like, standing there at the grocery store and then like the cashier person saying your card was declined. And they're like, it's stressful when you're sitting there like, let me hide my SDFLC shirt. Right. But so if you're constantly having to worry whether or not your card is going to get declined, that's definitely a sign that debt has become a source of stress for you. So what do you do for that one? Work on a plan to try and pay down the debt.
We use that word a lot,
with
don't
a budget where, come up with a budget where you don't necessarily have to use the card to begin with. If you can budget for things and set money aside and not depend on that credit card, then you don't have to worry about the transaction going through or not if your credit card stays in your pocket. So, if you're worrying about a transaction going through, then it's definitely a sign that debt has gotten out of control. Doesn't want to go every time. Also, if you avoid your statements or if you avoid looking at your balances altogether, if you find that you don't open statements, whether there be emails or physical statements that you get in the mail, and they're just kind of piling up in the corner, or you're start getting warnings that your mailbox is starting to get full, or you just refuse to log into your online banking accounts, that's a sign that that debt has become a problem, because avoidance isn't going to solve the problem, unfortunately.
Actually, it's going to enhance the stresses. In fact,
Right.
It's better to deal with a short-term stress of tackling what is in front of you, finding out what's there, so you can alleviate that, because otherwise it's not going away.
Right.
It might not be as high as it is when you're like opening that email or you're going to look at that, but you have to take control of it. You have to take a plan. And we all feel less stressed when we feel like we have a little bit more control. And we talk about this all the time. We can't go somewhere if we don't know where we're starting. So you've got to know where you are.
Yeah, you need to know. And it may be scary when you do it, but adding up your debt is not going to make it any worse. Your balances aren't going to go up.
It is what it
because you
is.
took the time to look for them. Exactly.
Yes.
If anything, it might be an eye-opening experience. If you do it regularly, it may also be a warning flag. As debt starts to creep up, you start to see those balances increase. That might be a warning sign that I need to change something now. So you might be able to get to the root of the problem before it becomes a problem, if you just stay on top of your balances and you stay on top of your statements.
And the flip side is if you start to punch away at it a little bit, and you start to watch those balances go down, that's going to alleviate stress. That's going to give yourself motivation to keep going. Exactly.
Next, we got, if you share your finances with a significant other, if you're worried that your partner will see it. If you start to worry whether or not your significant other is going to see your statements, or hope that they don't log into their online banking, if you have joint accounts, and start to see the balances increase. But if you're worried about your significant other seeing your statements, your balances, your
purchasing history,
recent activity, exactly.
Yeah.
Then that could be a sign that it's something that you need to address first internally with yourself, and then have that open communication and that open conversation with your significant other and say, hey, look, this has become an issue. I need to address it. Help me come up with a plan, or here's my plan. But it's better to just come out in the open and just say it. Don't, if you're hiding it, it's just going to get
There's
worse.
nothing good that's going to come of that.
No.
Eventually it's going to get you. It's like a lie. I mean, you are lying.
Right.
In a way, you're not being honest with your spouse
A
or
lie of
your
omission
significant other.
is still a lie.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we talk about financial infidelity, and we've talked about that a lot in our podcast, and I believe here once or twice. But financial infidelity, it can be not something that you're doing necessarily on purpose, but you're doing because you're afraid.
Absolutely.
And but that's not good for anybody.
Yeah. Another sign that finances, that your credit card debt is causing you stress, is if you start looking for where to borrow more money. If you're starting to look for debt, or the option for credit, available credit, so that you could pay debt that you already have, that's a sign, things have gotten out of control, and you really want to avoid that, because it's just going to cause more debt when
Ask
if you don't
for help
change
before you do anything like that. Got to ask for help before you do anything like that.
Absolutely.
You can only get yourself in worse trouble.
It's only going to get worse. And if you don't change the habits that got you into debt, even if you pay off your debt with a new loan, you pay off your credit cards or whatever it is, if you don't change what got you into debt to begin with, they're just going to build debt back up. And then you're just going to have this new debt plus this other new debt that you consolidated, and now you're going to have potentially double the amount of debt. So if you're starting to look around at different ways where you might be able to borrow money to pay off your credit card debt, to pay off your debt, that is a sign that the hose you could be stressing, and you might be putting in a lot of effort to try and find that solution, but that's not really a solution. That's just more of a patch. That's more of a, like, how can I push it to another day type of solution.
That's like that
That's
little
not gonna solve
Band-Aid
the
that you
problem.
stick on your finger that's round. It's
Right.
really small and it's going to be really hard to take off at some point, but it's not going to last long.
Right. So you definitely want to, if that's the problem, if that's the situation that you're in, that is a sign that, stress or credit cards have gotten to a very stressful point, and
If
they
a
need
place
to be
goes,
addressed.
if a place says no credit, bad credit, no problem, we finance anybody, please stay away from that.
Yeah, it's usually going to be the very high interest rates.
Oh, they're
and
feeding off that. They're feeding off fear.
Absolutely. So keep that in mind. You start to look to borrow money, that's a sign that perhaps it has gotten out of control. If it starts to cause you to lose some sleep, if you're losing sleep because of your financials, because of your debt, it has gotten to the point where it is stressing you out. Now some people are better sleepers than others. I can fall asleep anywhere, pretty much any time after 8. You know, but it's, and some people just have a hard time falling asleep, whatever it is. But if it's starting to mess with your sleeping patterns and you just can't go to sleep, or you wake up at night and the first thing you think about is your credit card debt or your debt in general, it's definitely to the point where you need to come up with a plan to try and relieve that stress. Life is stressful
Believe it or
enough.
not, just coming up with the plan can be stress relieving.
Right.
Coming up with a plan can make you feel like you've got places to go. That's an important step.
Yeah, it may not be an immediate solution, but at least you have a solution. You see the light at the end of
Yes.
the tunnel, and you know what you're working towards if you come up with a plan to pay off that debt. So if you're starting to lose some sleep over it, if you're starting to, have a hard time, and, like I said, you wake up in the middle of the night and your first thing you think about is, I got a credit card payment due, I got a debt payment due, how am I going to pay off this debt? That's definitely a sign that, debt is now causing you undue stress.
It can cause you monkey brain, feel like you're going from one thing to another. All the different things that all your money issues are having an effect on will really stress you out and affect your sleep.
Yeah. And what that could do for you the next day is you might be distracted at work. You might be distracted while even driving, but you might be falling asleep during the day because you weren't able to sleep at night. Or maybe you're awake, but you're just not there fully concentrated on work, on driving, on whatever it is. And that can start to affect you. It could be dangerous if you're driving and you're thinking about your debt. It could affect your ability to earn income if it's affecting your work performance. And, and that just turned the financial situation even worse.
Well,
So,
I mean, how many businesses lose work all the time from people that are calling in sick because they're not feeling good, they're tired. Productivity can go way down when their employees are stressed out about finances or whatever it might be. So a lot of businesses are working very hard at trying to figure out solutions, give you education, those kinds of things that can help. I mean, go to your HR, discuss these things, let them know how you're doing and what can be done.
Yeah. Or, reach out to local organizations that might be able to help, or something along those lines. I don't know if I'd go to HR, depending on the company that you work for.
Well, that depends on the company, but a lot of companies are becoming very open to that nowadays.
Yeah.
Because they don't want turnover. They want you to be healthy. They want you to be productive. So if you're productive, they need to do whatever they can to make you happy. That's why there's a lot of companies that have us go do these kinds of presentations and workshops and work with their individuals.
Yeah. So, definitely don't let it become a problem where it's causing you the inability to work at your top performance. Also, if you have financial stress and it's causing you to change the way you interact with your family. I found this Tom Hanks one. I thought it was funny.
That was good.
Parenting is a little easier in the morning, and then as the day progresses, especially on weekends when it's like, man, you've been talking and screaming the whole time, all day. Um, but if it changes the way you interact with your kids, if it changes the way you interact with your significant other, if it changes the way you interact with your pets, where like things that they're doing are more annoying, or you're more quickly to snap at them, or you just don't feel like you're getting the same kind of connection that you're having, and it's because you're sitting there thinking about your money. Obviously there's a million other things people can stress about, but if that source is playing with your kids, wondering when am I going to send in such and such payment, or how am I going to pay for this, or how am I going to pay this down, that's definitely a sign that debt has
And
become a stress in your life.
those kinds of stresses can lead to depression. I mean, but snapping, acting angry about things that you wouldn't normally get angry about. Depression doesn't mean you're just sad. It just means that the stresses is taking an effect on your body. And a lot of times it can on your mind. So that's important to realize, that if you're frustrated and angry at your kids a lot, or wife a lot, or husband, you're snapping at people, that's just a sign that there could be something a little bit more in depth, a little bit more things you might need to work at.
Yeah. Or if instead of just thinking of trying to maybe go to some kind of therapy or something, you decide I'm gonna fix it myself and I'm gonna go do some retail therapy. That's the wrong kind of therapy that you're looking for. If finances are what's causing you stress and your solution is retail therapy, all that's going to do is cause you more stress when you have to start paying for that retail therapy because it's not covered by your health insurance. And now you have more debt. Maybe you spent money on stuff you didn't need to spend money on. So if your solution by default is I'm stressing, I need to go buy something, it's really counterproductive. And you really want to try and identify that that's happening, and then do your best to put a stop to it, and make it so that you start paying back debt. Maybe the money that you were gonna shop for something you didn't need, you send it to your credit card payment, or you send an extra payment to your debt, and then you start to see the progress. And eventually that gets exciting too, when you're like, oh wow, I've made a lot of progress. And you start to see the dominoes fall, and you start knocking out credit cards. Maybe you had 6 and now you have 5 and then 4, and then it gets exciting. Like, I can't wait to pay this thing off, and what am I going to do with this money, and so on and so forth. So if retail therapy is a solution, try and identify it and try and cut it out. And
it's very similar to trying to lose weight. If you're going through that thing and you're trying, you're basically, if you're frustrated that you're not losing more weight, going and eating something else isn't going to help that. But once you start seeing success, you're going to be more motivated.
Right. If I get upset because I didn't lose any weight last week and I go buy a burrito, that's not going to help.
That's not going to
make it any better.
And you feel guilty after that. And then that's another added stress.
Right. Yeah. You might go
frustrated with yourself.
Yeah. You might go do the retail therapy, buy something. And by the time you're driving home, sitting there thinking like, man, I should not have spent that much money on XYZ or whatever it is that you
good news is you can take a lot of stuff back.
Right. You can return it, save your receipts. And if you didn't, you regret it by the time you get home, go return it.
Yes.
Or turn back around and go return it. So
yes,
definitely do that. It can also cause you to pick up bad habits, maybe bad habits you've kicked in the past, or new ones. If you see an increase in your, some of your alcohol consumption or tobacco use, smoking, whatever it is, it could be a sign that the debt has become a problem, and you start picking up unhealthy eating habits, even where you start stressing about it. So I'm going to go eat a whole tub of ice cream. Sounds good in the short term, but is that really a solution? Is that going to fix your finances? So if you start to pick up on bad habits, that's definitely could be a sign that has become a stressor.
Absolutely.
And then you can continue learning on the topic. We have some options here if you're a reader, or maybe you're not a reader. Either way, Katie has a great blog on the DebtWave site, Credit Card Debt Causing You Stress, 5 Warning Signs, if you want to read up more in much more detail. And if you just don't want to read and you want to listen to something, Our Talk Wealth to Me podcast has warning signs of stress due to credit card debt and what to do about it. And that you can listen to on Buzzsprout or wherever you get your other podcasts, which is the next slide. Always continue learning. You can always learn more. Talk Wealth to Me. Again, anywhere you get your favorite podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Pandora, iHeart.
Do you have any questions out there?
Any questions? Yeah.
I got one for you, Felipe.
All
Just
right.
for you. What do you do when you feel like money's kind of getting, I mean, we do what we do for a living, but we still feel, what do you do when you feel like things are a little bit out of control?
Aside from trying to identify what causes the problem, which for me is usually I'm eating out too much. For me, I do the same thing that I do to relieve any other kind of stress. Is I like to just go on a hike and just kind of get away and get away from noise and just kind of be out in nature.
To
That's
help you
my
gather your thoughts,
stress
kind
reliever.
of get a
Yeah.
game plan
Or
together.
if it's really, really tough, go on a really, really hard jog until knees, hamstrings, or lungs give out, one of the, or all three. And then just kind of walk home afterwards. I find that to be my stress reliever. Someone asked, can I get a free credit counseling session? Absolutely. If credit card debt, if debt has become a problem and is what's causing you stress, please reach out there to organizations that are willing to help. Reach out to DebtWave and have one of our amazing credit counselors go over your financial situation with you, help you come up with a budget, help you come up with a plan to address that debt. It's scary, but it could be one of the best benefits is give DebtWave a call and have someone sit down virtually or over the phone and sit down with you and really try and pinpoint where you find yourself on that debt journey, and then come up with the best solution and the different options that are available to you to get rid of that debt, because that's going to be the biggest stress reliever to stress caused by debt, is if you can get rid of the debt. And sometimes getting rid of it on your own is very difficult. And you might look at it and you're like, well, my plan is great, but it's going to take 15 years. That's a long time. So maybe you can look to see if there's other plans that'll get you out in 3 to 5 years, or lower your interest rates or things like that.
There are options out there.
Yeah, there are options out there. Reach out to DebtWave, debtwave.org, and you'll find their contact info, or 888-686-4040, and talk to someone over in the counseling department. They'd be happy to go over that information with you as well.
That's right. Absolutely. Any other questions? That's a good one. Dominique, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us.
Very grateful. Here, I can turn my camera on so you can see me. Since I saw some of the cameras off, I left mine off.
That's okay.
That's okay.
That's okay. I get that.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you so much for this training. It was really good. And
Good.
I will